recording and we'll get started. So, welcome. I am excited that you're here. I wanted to invite you to this really special edition of In Conversation With. This is also, as I've explained to Kasey and future guests, is I'm starting a podcast. So what I do is I record these sessions and these conversations, and then I upload them to my YouTube playlist. And now I'll be migrating them over to major podcast platforms. So while you're doing the dishes, you can listen. You don't have to watch. So I'm very excited about it. Let's see, we've got our October guest is lined up, and that is Lindsay Warren, and she's here today, and she'll be talking to us about green and natural burial. And then we have in November, we don't have anybody yet. They're thinking about it. In December, we have Gabrielle Jimenez, Gabby. She is very prolific in her Facebook, The Hospice Heart, and she's pretty amazing. She's got a lot of energy, a lot of experience, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So without much more ado, sorry, a little bit of housekeeping again, just to remind you that when I'm looking down, I'm taking notes. I'm not ignoring you. So we'll get started. And Kasey, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us about you.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me. So, hi everyone. I am Kasey March. I'm the head doula behind Doula Care for Dying. I'm trying to ignore my bio in the chat so that I don't say the same things you've already read. But basically, I'm an end-of-life doula. I support folks who are navigating or actually experiencing end of life. So I provide practical, emotional, and logistical support. And Trish actually reached out to me to talk about one portion of my practice, which is supporting people who are navigating medical aid and dying in Vermont. So Vermont is one of 10 states in the District of Columbia that currently has a law that allows people to request a medication to hasten their death if they meet certain criteria. It is also one of only 2 states that doesn't have a residency requirement. And so one of the things that I will be talking to folks about today is how I, as a doula, help people navigate that process. What this Wayfinder thing is, which is a little bit separate, well, not separate, but is something particular to Vermont. So I will talk about that. And then honestly, I want to have a dialogue. Ask me your questions. Let's hear what you're interested in knowing, and I am happy to share.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Any questions so far? All right. So Kasey, why don't you start with, taking us exploring the role of an end-of-life doula in medical aid and dying, or MAID decisions.
Sure. I think in order to answer that question, I might need to back up a little bit further and just give you sort of the 10,000-foot overview of what is medical aid and dying in Vermont, like what the law is, what the requirements are. And then I can talk to you about like who's on the team of supporting someone through that process, and specifically what end-of-life doulas do. Does that work? Awesome. So medical aid in dying is someone's ability to request from their physician a prescription of medication to hasten their death. It is available in Vermont to people who are over the age of 18, who are able to make and communicate their medical decisions, who have a terminal diagnosis and a prognosis of 6 months or less. So these are people that are already really close to dying. They are hospice eligible. They also have to be making an informed decision and can't be coerced by someone else. So folks have to have the cognitive ability to understand the decision they're making. You can't make any pre-arrangements for this. There is no like advanced directive that you can do to request medical aid in dying at a particular point. It is based on your current health and your ability to, in that moment, understand what you are requesting, make that request, and self-administer the medication. So that is sort of who is eligible for medical aid in dying. The how of it is how do you obtain the prescription? The requirements are that you have to have 3 doctor's appointments in order to request this prescription. 2 are with the person that I refer to as the prescribing physician, because that is the doctor that is going to write the prescription for the medication. Those 2 appointments with that physician, they have to be at least 15 calendar days apart. So 2 weeks in one day. If you meet for the first time on a Monday, cannot speak to that doctor for the purposes of this process again until 2 weeks later on Tuesday. The first time you meet with a prescribing physician, what they are really doing is an end of life consult. So they are talking about all of your end of life options, right? They are talking to you about hospice, they are talking to you about palliative care, continuing treatment.
Mhm.
And of course, they recognize that folks who are in those appointments are there because they want to know about medical aid in dying. And so they are talking about medical aid in dying. The doctor is reviewing your medical records if you aren't someone that has already been an established patient of theirs. So the reason that might be is because this is a completely voluntary process. Not every doctor in Vermont who is an MD and can potentially write a prescription would be willing to do so. And so, as a Vermont resident, you might be seeing a practitioner that you have seen for years and years, and they are completely familiar with your medical records. And so, they are just verifying that you meet all of the requirements. Or you might be seeing someone that is new, that you have just reached out to for this process because they are the provider that you could access that was willing to be a part of the process. And so that doctor is going to review all of your eligibility criteria. They're going to answer all of your questions because you can't make an informed medical decision if you don't get to ask all of your questions.
Mhm.
And that is sort of appointment 1 with that first prescribing physician. You also have an appointment with the person that I refer to as a consulting physician. So it is a second doctor. Often when people undergo this process, they meet with the prescribing physician first, then they meet with a consulting physician because those 2 appointments are the same. They are doing the same thing, but is a checks and balances system, right? So not only did 2 different doctors say that you meet all of the requirements, but you as the patient in this situation have the opportunity to ask 2 different medical professionals all of your questions and hopefully get the same exact answers from both of them. So again,
Mhm.
you have the opportunity to make really well-informed medical decisions. Your last appointment is typically with your prescribing physician. So those are the appointments that had to be 15 days apart, right? Prescriber physician appointment 1 and that last prescribing appointment. That is the appointment where you would make your written request for the medication. That is signed and witnessed by 2 individuals that are not interested persons. Interested persons is somebody who could stand to inherit or in some other way benefit. Also, it can't be
Right.
somebody that works for the hospital, medical facility, wherever it is, where you're receiving the care that you are accessing medical aid in dying. So, in summary, 3 doctor's appointments to request the medication, 2 verbal requests for the medication. So those verbal requests have to be 15 days apart, which means they're typically happening in prescriber appointment 1 and 2, and 1 written request, which is also most likely happening in your last appointment with the prescriber. So you're requesting the medication twice in the same appointment in 2 different forms. And I know that was a lot, so I tend to pause here to see if anyone has any questions just about that part of the process.
Well, I had a question,
Yeah.
Kasey. Um, how does insurance view all this? Because
Yeah. Yep. How does insurance view all this?
you're not going to be around to pay the bill.
Well, maybe not, right? So
Wow.
this process is all about choice. So people get to change their mind at any time. So maybe you are going to be around. But So it depends. What I have seen with the doctors that my clients often work with, down here in my particular region of Southern Vermont, and I'm giving you all of those qualifiers because every billing office for every medical facility does things their own way. But typically when folks work with me, they book their appointments with their doctors. And then what I have them do is after they talk to scheduling and they get all of their appointments on the calendar, I tell them to ask this question. I say, can I speak to the billing office? Have them sent over there, and then they ask for what's called a verification of benefits. So you have the billing office run your health insurance to see whatever medical insurance code they are using for that type of appointment. So for an end of life consult appointment, if your insurance will cover it. Now, end of life consults where doctors talk to you about hospice, palliative care, and in this case, medical aid in dying and anything else, those are typically covered by insurance. But again, there are nuances to what kind of insurance you're on. Is this provider that you've connected with in network, out of network? So I always recommend running a verification of benefits for the doctor's appointments themselves. The prescription is not covered by health insurance. I have come across a single insurance company that pays for the prescription. So it is self-pay out of pocket. The last time someone got a prescription, and these rates can change over time, but as of right now, the last time someone got a prescription, it was $750.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you answered two questions that I didn't get a chance to ask. So thank you very much, Kasey.
You're welcome. So I know, Trish, that when you originally asked me the question and I talked about sort of the 10,000 foot overview, you were asking about the doula role in this entire process, right? So what I am doing is I am really supporting folks I am supporting folks through this logistically and emotionally. It's a big decision to make through this process. When folks are trying to decide if it is a good fit for them, it is often helpful to be able to practice the conversation with someone who does not have a vested interest in the outcome. So what I mean by that is you can have this conversation with your dear friend and say, I am considering this and, I'm really thinking about it. You can have this conversation with one of your adult children. You can have this conversation with your spouse. And you might be aware in those conversations that they really care about what you decide. And so that level of the relationship sometimes makes it challenging to do the internal work of figuring out, do I really want this? Because you are worried about how the other person is going to take it. And your ability to sort of fumble around and not know might have an emotional impact on the other person. And so there's a lot of caution there. When it comes to an end of life doula, you're not going to hurt me by changing your mind, by thinking, yes, you want to do this, by thinking, no, you don't want to do this. And so that little bit of level of distance gives people the room they need to sort of figure out exactly how they're feeling about things. That's one level of support that I provide. Another is just helping folks navigate all of the different moving parts of this. So first, there is just getting the doctor's appointments, coordinating and making sure your medication is there on the day that you're going to take it. But the doctors and the pharmacy are not the only members of the team. You also, best practice is to have hospice involved. So if you are already enrolled in hospice and you live in the state of Vermont, your hospice providers would be the one that were called after you take the medication to come and pronounce your death. If you live in New Hampshire, but your doctors are in Vermont, and so you are pursuing this as an end-of-life option, you're also figuring out, where do I take the medication? Because I can't take the medication across the border to New Hampshire. All of the protections in the law would go away if I did that. And I wouldn't get a death certificate that said whatever my underlying illness was on it. I would get a New Hampshire death certificate, which might say suicide on it. And if that's the case, insurance policies that you have, pension, all kinds of ramifications start coming up. And so one of the other things that I'm helping folks do is make sure you've got a safe place to take this medication. Even if you're a Vermont resident, if you live somewhere like a nursing home, you might not be allowed to take this medication on premises. And so you want a home-like environment to take this medication. So I've got a list of about 9 different places where The homeowners know that people stay in this space and take the medication there. They are comfortable with a funeral home coming and collecting someone. They are private, right? Like this is a safe and respectable to the people who are going through the process, but also to the homeowners who are making their space available. Like it is a really respectful process. We have teamwork here. Also, sometimes even people who are doing home hospice in Vermont and are staying in their private home, they don't want to take the medication in their private home because they don't want someone else that is currently living with them to have to remember that space as the space that they died. Um, and that's fine. I really try to normalize for people who are comfortable with it. Dying at home was a really normal process right up until the 1950s. But there are certainly people who say, yeah, I understand that, and that's still not the right fit for our family. And that's okay. We connect them to the right resources. In this case, one of the houses that's on my list. So now I've gone over doctors are one of the teammates. The pharmacist is one of the teammates. Hospice is one of the teammates, right? You've got somebody like me. So I'm an end-of-life doula. Sometimes I refer to myself as a bedside attendant for this process because on the day somebody takes the medication, I'm there the whole day, right? We have talked ahead of time because I'm a doula and we have planned out how folks want the day to go and we run this as an end-of-life vigil. So just like at the beginning of life, people might make their birth plan, for this transition out, we are making your dignity day plan. We are talking about what kind of music you want playing, if there are any prayers that you want said, if there are any other rites through your religious or spiritual tradition. If there are not, if we are coming up with things that are going to mark this moment as sacred, that are going to start the healing practice for the loved ones that are involved. So we put together all of that plan. We talk about everything ahead of time. I am there to help execute it on the day. I also make myself responsible for being the logistics person on the day. So every important phone number that we need, anyone that might need to be contacted on the day for any reason, I'm responsible for having all of that information. Family is able to do as much of that as they want. So if they want to make the call to hospice when someone has taken their last breath, they are welcome to do that. If they would rather be bedside and be with their person and they want me to make that call, I will do it. When they are ready, they can call the funeral home, the crematory, the team that is coming into the house to help them with after death body care. If they don't want to do that, they want somebody else to do the admin, I can do that for them as well. So those are some of the different pieces of support. A lot of what I do is coordination. I just told you about doctors and hospice and pharmacy and me and the loved ones that are supporting. I tend to work with the person who is going to be taking the medication to be this sort of central place to take in information, keep it organized, and then distribute information to who needs it so that the person who is going through the process is not inundated with that all the time.
So you're kind of an event planner.
You are the second person to say that I'm kind of an event planner. A little bit. There are pieces of it that feel event planning like because there's logistics. There's a lot of heart involved in this work. There is a lot of sitting with people, making space for what they're going through. Sometimes there's attending doctor's appointments with them and taking notes because they want to really focus on having the conversation with the doctor. And so I am there to say, you don't have to put pen to paper. I will take care of doing that. And we talked ahead of time and you told me what questions you wanted to make sure you asked. So I have them in a little box on the corner of my page. And if we're coming to the end of the appointment and I realize you didn't ask it, I just very gently say, hey, you wanted to ask the doctor about what if I decide I don't want to take the medication really quickly after my last appointment? How do you send it to the pharmacy? Do you still want to ask that question? And sort of prompt and do those things as well.
And sometimes there is, people decide to have an after party, that, after they die, and they have a celebration, if you will, of life, with all kinds of, food and music, etc. And, so it really is, it goes back to what you said earlier. It really is about choice and, what options, people are comfortable with, and, working a lot. And if you could go into this a little more deeply, um, what it's like working with the family dynamics of, partners and kids and family and that kind of thing. What you've seen, maybe tell us some stories about that.
Sure. So families are families, and family dynamics can get sort of heightened in situations where a lot of emotion is involved, right? So all of the things that we do really well, the ways that we support each other, those can get heightened. You can see those happen really, really beautifully in these intense emotional situations. And some of the undercurrents and strife and tensions and things like that, those can also come to the surface and get heightened because everybody is expending energy in different ways. And maybe our coping mechanisms and be on our best behavior is not the way that we're spending our energy. I am really careful about never sort of showing up as if I were a clinical provider, right? Like I am not offering family therapy or anything like that. What I do is talk to clients about what their wishes are for the day and help reinforce that and remind folks, um, we're here for this particular purpose today. Sally has said that this is really important to her. Sometimes I work with the person who's going to be taking the medication for the instructions that I give to everyone when we gather together. So I have sort of a opening ceremony, if you will, where I thank everybody for being there, for supporting their person. I talk to them about what they can expect for the day. I remind them of signs and symptoms that they might see when someone is actively dying throughout this process so that they are not worried, so that they know those things are normal. And any reminders that I have from the individual who is passing about things that they do or do not want to see on the day. So someone might say, I don't want people to touch me when I'm no longer conscious, or I don't have a spiritual tradition, but I really honor everybody else's. You are welcome to pray silently, but please don't pray out loud over my body, even when my eyes are closed. Things like that, right?
Mhm.
And so having some of those practices helps put the bumpers on the situation. Folks know, oh, okay, these are sort of what the expectations are. The other piece is just practical things, right? Like I bring tissues with me, the houses that I work in, I identify to people places that they can go if they need a minute to step away from what is going on. I remind them that we've got multiple people present. And so no one needs to feel the full burden of sitting vigil alone the entire time that we're there. And I worked with another doula recently who did this very beautiful thing where she reminded them that they're really great at taking care of each other. And so they can continue to do that on the day as well. So not just about the person taking the medication, but about the whole family, friend, chosen family unit caring for its own. And so I have now adopted that into my practice because it really resonated with me.
Um, Kasey, if I might, um, a couple of questions. One is, I know that HIPAA covers all the medical people involved in this, but are there any rules on confidentiality that aren't written, I guess, or unspoken? Uh, if the person uh, wishes this not to be advertised,
Yeah.
uh, how would you, in your experience, how would you consider those people not covered by HIPAA?
Yeah. So I'm not a medical provider, right? And so
Right,
in most situations, HIPAA does not necessarily apply to me because I should not be collecting protected health information. That being said, your protected health information can include things like your name and your address. And so I have confidential information all the time by the nature of the work that I provide. So confidentiality is really important to me. When I work with folks, whether they are paying clients or not, you know, they might be receiving pro bono services, they always get a client agreement that outlines what I do and what they can expect from me, what I do not do, a very clear confidentiality statement. And there is a part of my client agreement that says, can I tell an anonymized version of your story in order to educate others? So without any of your identifying information, and people can opt out. And so if someone says, even if it's anonymous, even if you don't say my name, the state that it came from, my diagnosis, I really don't want you talking about my experience having gone through this or any other dying process. That's a normal part of all of my client agreements, even not connected to medical aid and dying. I respect and honor that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, is there something sort of legally binding for end-of-life doulas? We are not, we're not licensed professionals like nurses, doctors, and things like that. There is a professional code of ethics and scope. Depending on where you've done your training or what national organization you're part of, it might be slightly different. But I put together a PDF on if you're going to hire an end of life doula, here's some questions that you can ask to make sure somebody's a good fit. Trish, I will share it with you. You can share it with folks. But that's a really good way, no matter what end of life choices you're exploring, if you're looking to work with somebody like me to support that, that you can find someone that's going to meet your values and interests, especially around things like training, confidentiality, et cetera.
One last question. I don't want to monopolize, but you mentioned family therapy earlier on in your talk, and do you keep a list of referrals that because you identify yourself as not a family therapist, but in many cases I would think that might be somebody might come up with that question. Well, can we see a family therapist?
Yes, they might.
Or you might even say, boy, to yourself, these people need a family therapist.
Uh, so I do keep a bunch of different lists of providers that if somebody asks and said, we're needing a resource, whether they're identifying, I am needing a resource and it's called a family therapist, or they're saying, we are running into this problem. Is that something you help with? And I say, that's not inside my scope of work, but you might want to consider working with a family therapist or a licensed clinical social worker. And here are a couple in the Brattleboro area that are accepting new clients. In addition to my role as an end of life doula, I'm also a volunteer for a non-medical hospice. It's called the Center for Solace. And if I don't have a recommendation for a service provider, that hospice has been around for decades, is really embedded in the community. And so oftentimes I can just reach back out to my coordinator and say, hey, this is something in my professional work, but I know we are in the same circles. I've got a family that is in this region. Do you have a contact that you would recommend there? So that's one way I get like soft referrals for folks that I can say, I know they're taking new clients. I know that they do this type of work. Also, when you do work like this, I think it's really important that you are aware of your own stuff when it comes up, that you do your self work. And so I work with a therapist the way that people who really care about their body might use a trainer at the gym, right? Even if there's not a problem, even if the things are all well and good, we check in and we meet regularly. And so sometimes when a client needs a resource, I reach out to him and I say, hey, do you have a recommendation for somebody who's accepting new clients? And he will give me information that I can share with them as well. So I don't worry so much about I need to have in this moment already set up the exact right resources for every single situation. I know I've been doing this work in the community long enough that even if I don't have the answer, I can reach out to my network and we can find the right person.
Thank you, Kasey.
You're welcome.
So we're at 4:30, and I want to leave more time open for everybody's questions. So I'll start with one question. What are the challenges that, someone like you in this role might have? work as a wayfinder working in MAID?
Yeah. So Wayfinder is a term that has been trademarked by Patient Choices Vermont. And so Patient Choices Vermont is the legal advocacy group that did all of the amazing work to get this law initially passed in 2013 and all of the amendments since that have changed things like the ability for people to do telemed appointments, though you still have to be in Vermont for your telemed appointment, and lifting the residency requirement. So when the residency requirement lifted, one of the things that happened is the helpline that Patient Choices Vermont has was getting a lot of calls from people asking for support, sort of navigating this process, right? Things above and beyond the scope of a legal advocacy group. And so they identified that there are already people in the community that are helping navigate. And so they became the hub and opened up for what is called wayfinders. So these are people who might be end-of-life doulas like me. They might be social workers. They might be retired hospice nurses. But these are people with skills to help folks navigate through this process. They are affiliated with Patient Choices Vermont, but not employed by Patient Choices Vermont. Sort of, we collaborate together. We do regular monthly meetings. There is training standardization to make sure that everybody who uses this Wayfinder title has this level of understanding of the law and best practices and things like that. So there is some assurance to people who are reaching out to folks listed on this Wayfinder page that they know their stuff, right? Like they're not just anyone who put their shingle out there. So I am a Wayfinder with Patient Choices Vermont. I have done that training. I do their retraining and any additional professional development they offer because I think that's great and super supportive. But as far as your question, Trish, about what kind of challenges folks might run into, there's a variety of things that can be challenges. One is identifying your scope of work and staying within it, right? Like this role is relatively new. There are only 2 states in the country where there's not a residency requirement. So the nuance of what type of support and what level of support do you need? Are you trying to figure out things like travel arrangements? Do you need a safe place to take this medication? Do you need to get connected to doctors because you're from several states away and you don't have anyone to connect with? How long is the wait time? Even knowing what kinds of questions to ask. So people who might be traveling from several states away, they might be familiar with in their region, oh, I live in a hospice house and I'm just going to transfer to a hospice house in Vermont and go through this process and get in touch with a wayfinder who says, well, actually, there's a limited number of beds and the wait list is particularly long. So that is probably not going to be your best way to navigate resources. Or they might think, oh, I use a home healthcare agency at home. I am just going to reach out to the local one and get somebody to come in 3 or 4 days a week to help me with, showering and some other daily life activities. That might be an option in a region, but again, those resources might be more difficult to tap into. So some of the challenges is if you're not already embedded in doing end of life work, you personally might not know the scope of what is and is not available in your region versus what is somebody's expectation from wherever they are coming from. And that's a blind spot, right? That's a blind spot for somebody calling you who doesn't even realize that the resources are different regionally. It could be a blind spot for you as a provider. It could be a little bit difficult to build up that network in the beginning and figure out where are the safe ingestion locations? What is going to be really important for homeowners to know if I am approaching them and saying, can we use your space to do that? How do you support your teammates, the other stakeholders in this process, right? That's important. The other thing is for patients themselves, navigating what I call threading the needle. I am well enough to attend all of these doctor's appointments, whether you're in Vermont or not, traveling back and forth for your doctor's appointments. But also I am close enough to whatever my milestones are. Maybe it's quality of life, maybe it has to do with cognition, that I still qualify and it is time to take the medication. That is something that folks can really struggle with. One of my clients said, it's always too soon to take this medication until it's too late. that's how they felt about the process. And so one of the things that can be difficult is walking with somebody through that, because it is a decision only they can make, and creating a space for them to change their mind and go back and forth and feel really unsettled. I think that sometimes it can be very difficult for us to sit with someone else's discomfort without trying to fix it. But in this particular process, trying to fix it can feel like pressure to make a decision any particular way. And also, the doula role is not to fix it, right? It's to make space for someone to do whatever level of work they want to, right? Whether they are going to engage in like trying to get into this and resolve it, or whether they have decided it's not where I want to spend my energy. And I think that boundary, that is something that folks have to be conscious of, right? I don't know that that comes natural in our everyday life and is something that we're doing all of the time. It's something we practice.
Anybody have a question?
Well,
AD? Go ahead, Steve.
here I go again. Do you ever get asked to help a family member with the obituary?
That's really interesting. You're the second person to ask me that this week, and I have never been asked that question before. So, I don't normally get asked to help family members with obituaries. A lot of times because they are already working with a funeral home that provides that support, I am more than willing to do it. I do spend a lot of time working with people on preparing other things, like letters for their children that are going to be handed out after. And my undergraduate degree was in English. So like writing and helping prepare materials and communication is something that I enjoy. And so I bring that to my work. But no, I have never helped somebody write an obituary. I I think I would really enjoy doing that if it was something that anyone ever said, like, hey, can you help me with this? And I'd be like, yeah, let me interview you and figure some things out, and we'll figure out what to put in this obituary of yours.
Yeah. So I mention that only because, you've gotten to know the family, you've gotten to know the person involved. Um, and I sometimes worry when I read in the newspaper, they were surrounded by family and friends and they died at home. That
Mhm.
that's that's telling me almost that and I, as the person involved, I might not want it to be known.
Yeah,
So you might not want to, your expertise would be very helpful. And a funeral home doesn't normally know the person.
sure.
Uh, yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That was a great answer. I appreciate it.
No problem. And thank you for your questions. It really helps to have dialogue. So I appreciate you being brave enough to, unmute and ask questions. I know that can be hard, especially with topics like this.
I have drafted an obituary just based on what, somebody told me. And so that the family could use it as a touchstone, because I'm just writing the stories and they may decide, and in this case they did, it was much more, it had less stories in it that they had shared. It was, and we were born and then we married and that kind of stuff. Um, but the woman who asked me to do it was like, this is precious to me, what you wrote. And, I will always keep that because she was the one who was sharing those stories with me. Yeah, Nadine.
You're on
Oh,
mute.
Popped
there
up.
you go.
Casey, that question that Steve asked about writing obituaries, as a doula, as a volunteer, I can tell you that I've heard stories that the family has never heard.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned, can I share that with your wife? Oh yeah, I don't know if she's going to care, but it when you ask somebody
Mhm.
a question like that, it just opens up all kinds of nerve endings and emotions, and
Mm,
people, maybe nobody ever asked them that.
mm,
Yeah, I was I directed an adult day center for adults who had um, what's the word I'm thinking of? Congenital uh, disabilities, mental
Mhm.
disabilities, and some had Down syndrome.
developmental.
Yeah.
They were like in their 55, 60 years old.
Yep.
And we did a poetry program with them. And through, it was just a 5 cents poetry program, and asking them, what's your favorite place? And somebody might say home. And what did it smell like? And what did it look like? And what did you see? And these wonderful stories came out, and we wrote down verbatim what they said, because nobody ever asked them that before. And that's what I see. I love some of my hospice patients, because they want to talk. They want to make a difference. They want to know that they had contributed something, or that they felt happiness over something in particular. So yeah, I that writing an obituary, I mean, I don't know if I'd really want to write the obituaries, but certainly share with the family these wonderful things with the person's um, permission, of course.
Yeah.
Mhm,
But yeah,
mm,
Um, there's a resource, Trish, I'll try to send you a link to it after this meeting. It's called the Legacy Death deck. So
yes,
there's a card game that's a death deck, there's a grief deck, and there's a legacy one. And I have all three sort of in my doula kit, but the legacy one is organized into categories. So it gives you
mm,
question prompts that you can ask folks about different
yeah,
things. So if you are a hospice volunteer and you're like getting to
mm,
know someone, sometimes you don't have to use it as a playing card deck.
no,
Sometimes just
no,
having them in your car and flipping through a couple of them is helpful. They're actually really fun with your own family for holidays. Like forget Cards Against Humanity and all of that. Like
yeah,
let's play this one. Um, but yeah, it's a really good resource. It's also a good resource for like journal prompts if you're
mm,
doing internal work and you're investigating. So yeah, I will go look up at my deck, because if you just try to Google legacy deck, you're going to get things about like actual decking.
yeah.
mm.
I will send it to Trish so that she can share in whatever form she does.
Great, thank you.
Perfect.
That comes
Um,
in handy. We have a cousins weekend coming up this weekend, like 30, 40 people. It's a good game to play.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Wow. So, I worked with Lindsay, who is also a certified.
Oh, I think Trish might have paused.
Yeah,
This
there we go.
process to a family was, the again, the choice part is really important. And, but if it's something you're considering, to go ahead and take, the doctor appointments and that kind of thing, because you can always change your mind. But if it's like a last minute decision, you've got those
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
periods. Am I saying that right, Lindsay?
Yeah, and you froze when
Oh,
you first started. So I'm also a wayfinder, and Casey's done such a beautiful job talking us through the process, and I always love hearing how eloquent she is. And yeah, I think she probably could weigh in on this too. We get a lot of phone calls of people like, oh, mom wants to do this now. Hospice is saying maybe she has 2 weeks left.
Oh,
And there's just not time to get in for the appointments. A lot of times, the providers that we work with have a lengthy wait list, and it's 2 months to get in to have that first
Really?
appointment where you make the request, and then there's that 2-week period where you have to wait. And so if it's something, you know, there's that range, right? To qualify, you have to be 6 months or less prognosis. So, but
Hmm.
not waiting till the very, very end. It's great to go on and explore it and have family conversations now, and talk about what your milestones, what are your boundaries? Like if this happens, um, that this I can tolerate, this I can't, for how you choose to live the rest of your days. So yeah, conversations now is good. And when you do get that 6-month prognosis, and if you want it to be a card, an option on the table, then it's good to go on and have those appointments. It's good to talk to your providers now too. I just had a inquiry from someone in Vermont recently who really thought her provider would be on board with it, and she got a diagnosis, or her chemo treatments are no longer working, and her provider said no, he does not support that. And so she was really shocked and sort of left feeling stuck. So it's good to go on and explore that with your doctor as well now. And maybe if they're on the fence, get in touch with one of us. We can put you in touch with some of the doctors that work with Patient Choices Vermont to talk with your provider if it's their first time, like how they can do that. They're training doctors all the time so that they're more familiar with the process. So.
Hmm.
Good to know. Thank you. Margot, do you have any questions? Oh, you take you off.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sitting here saying, and I'm in New York and I can't do any of this, but I did not know that I could come to Vermont and do it. That's
Yes.
very cool to know.
And they're trying to pass the legislation in your state, and we'll see what happens. But yes, Vermont is a available option. Oregon is as well. It's a longer flight, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just finding that very interesting. It never even crossed my mind to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or not that far at all.
Yeah. Well, and
That's right.
you know, it's one of the options, right? Like it's one of the things on the table. It's one of the things to consider. It's not going to be a good fit for everybody for a variety of reasons. You know, Lindsay talked about folks reaching out, and maybe they're already too frail, right, to go back and forth to doctor's appointments, or, you know, cognition is changing so quickly that 2 weeks to get from that first doctor's appointment to that last doctor's appointment really might be too much, right?
Mhm.
There are certainly situations where even if values aligned, it's a good fit. It doesn't work just because of the criteria, which is designed to protect people, right? And I think is there and serving a purpose. So one of the challenges of taking those initial phone calls is people who reach out, you know, excited feels like the wrong word, but really feeling good about this option, that it's going to be a good fit for them. And then they describe their situation and they say something that indicates to me, now, not a medical provider, but just based on the information you're sharing with me and what I know of the law, that this is not going to be a good fit, that you're not going to be eligible. Then it's having the conversation of, these are the criteria. There is no workaround. Like the criteria are set in stone. And do you know all of your end of life options, and walking folks through, like, do you know about hospice? Do you know about palliative care, about continuing treatment, about stopping treatment? Do you know about voluntary stopping eating and drinking, and the resources that you would put in place if you wanted to follow a process like that? And really providing support to folks, because I truly believe, and Lindsay and Trish, I'm a broken record. You've heard this statement a million times. I believe that everybody deserves a well-supported death, and that is going to look different for each person. It's going to look different in each community. But it requires having information, right, to make values aligned decisions. And so if you picked up the phone and you called me and we started a conversation and you thought we were going to talk about medical aid and dying, and we did, and it sounded like it wasn't a good fit, I'm not just done and trying to get off the phone with you. I'm trying to figure out what is the next step. Are you looking for
Mhm.
additional information? How do I get you to the information you need or the resource you need near you, right? Because someone might reach out to me thinking they're going to be in my part of the state and working with something. And based on our conversation, it actually sounds like they're going to be somewhere else, right? Their home is in the Northeast Kingdom and they need support somewhere else. All right, well, I'm going to connect them to Lindsay. Or they were somebody that's going to be in another state and it doesn't make sense to travel to Vermont. But now they're thinking about voluntary stopping eating and drinking. And who's
Hmm.
somebody like Kasey that could help them through this process in their home state? And now I'm teaching them how to find a doula in their home state and probably actually reaching out to my networks to say, hey, does anybody have experience with voluntary stopping eating and drinking that's taking new clients in this particular region and sending them warm referrals? I don't want somebody having to pick up the phone and interview lots of people who totally aren't qualified, have no background in this stuff if they don't have to. If they've already talked to me and I know how to navigate some of these things and it's easy for me because this is my
Mhm.
profession and it's what I do every day, soft handoff to
Mhm.
I've now given you the contact information for the 5 people that responded to me that said, yep, I would be willing to do that. I have this kind of training. Here's a little bio that you can send them. Here's my phone number. Here's my website, right? And I sent that information along with the resource I talked to Trish about before. Here's the interview questions that you asked for an end of life doula so that people are well supported no matter where they are.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna
No,
say,
you go ahead.
ideally, no matter their income, right? So
Mhm.
I work on sliding scale, and my pricing structure is changing right now. So that the way that I work is the people who pay at the top end of the scale, the money that does not keep the lights on goes into a savings account so that when people need to be at the bottom end of the scale or completely pro bono, those reserves can be pulled into the business to keep the lights on, and I can provide that support, right?
Hmm.
But I am also aware of the people who are doulas that, this is their bonus career. They are retired. They are not interested in earning an income from this work and they only do pro bono work. And I make referrals, right? Like there are more people needing services than people available to provide them right now with like the
Wow.
expertise. So no such thing as competition. Like let's just get you to the person who is the
Exactly.
right fit for your situation.
Exactly. And Lindsay and I had this conversation earlier today, is throughout my career, I've always been a connector. So, I know what, my mission and vision is right now, which is mostly community education, but I also provide respite, et cetera, et cetera. But there are different things like, MAID, like, green and natural burial that I am blessed to know people who know more than I do to be able to, again, do that soft referral and say, you might, if you're interested in this, I would, recommend you, talk to, Lindsay, and this is her, contact information. And I think we all do that. And it goes back to something you said earlier, Casey, is if we don't know, we'll find out.
Mm, mm,
We'll keep asking. And you most recently did that through one of our doula groups on Facebook. You need somebody, excuse me, had contacted you from Queens on Long Island. And so we were all putting our heads together. Who do we know, that we could refer? And so I think the only amplification I could help and provide was on LinkedIn. And I didn't hear from anybody, but you're also starting to educate people. It's like, what's an end of life doula? And what,
right.
there's some in my neighborhood or, in my region. Yes. And, so it's, part of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
If we
And
have
that,
a moment, oh, sorry.
no,
Uh,
go,
I
go,
was
go,
just
go.
going to ask Kasey to talk a little bit about that term parallel planning and why it's so important for if you're interested in pursuing medical aid in dying. What is parallel planning?
You know what parallel planning is, and you are an expert in this too. So I'm going to let you talk about it. I understand that I'm the guest today, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to answer. But no, shine, Lindsay, like you're good at this.
Oh,
What is
no,
parallel
no.
planning? Talk to us about it.
I love hearing how you concisely walk people through these things. So you go.
All right. Okay. So parallel planning, this process is fluid, right? Like at any given point in time, people can change their mind, have lots of different things come up in the process. So what I am really talking about, see, you said I'm eloquent, and now I'm gonna lose all my words and have a hard time. When I'm doing planning with folks, right? There's plan A. There's what they want to happen. There's what is ideal, if everything goes according to plan. And we know how the world works, that things change all the time. That somebody's ride doesn't show up, or they get a flat tire and they miss a doctor's appointment, and oh my gosh, oh no, what is the next step, right? So it's all of the contingencies that are like built in for when someone changes their mind. Now, that does not mean that me as an individual, I am sitting up with like my giant whiteboard of, okay, this is plan A, and here's the 15 things, and here's plan B, and everything is all mapped out, and we can immediately switch from one to the other. But it does mean that I understand the scope of this work enough, and who my partners are in this process, what hospice can provide, who we would need to reach out to, what the turnaround times are, things like that, that if our ideal plan is not working and we are needing to pivot, I'm ready to do it, right? I'm ready with resources that we're going to reach out to, having asked the client questions about their values to say, like, some of it is about delivery. Okay, we wanted to do X, Y, and Z. That was your goal. It looks like this is not working as intended for this reason. My understanding is you wanted these particular doctor's appointments on this date because you wanted to make sure you took advantage of as many good days as possible. Are you still committed to this process, even if it's a slower one? Or do you want to explore alternatives? Do you want to explore VSED? Do you want to explore hospice because your symptoms are changing and travel is starting to feel difficult for you? Or because your symptoms have plateaued and you wanted this as a safety net and the travel feels burdensome and maybe the safety net doesn't feel as necessary anymore? Like, parallel planning is what I think of it as the ability to sort of switch gears, right? To go from plan A to plan B and have all of these parallel options, if you will. What I miss, Lindsay?
I'm just thinking back to one of the clients that we collaborated on, and and how often people have a real clear image of how they want things to go, whether it's like your birth plans or your death plans, and then other things come up, like other health things that were unforeseen, like with the person we were working with, like all of a sudden there's a bowel obstruction. And so, going forward with medical aid in dying was not going to happen or going to have to be put off. And they had lots of tough decisions to make. Do I just go to hospice? Do I go to the hospital and treat the bowel obstruction? Like, so just knowing that it's like to allow for there to be flexibility when you're planning on pursuing medical aid and dying, and know that sometimes other conditions get in the way with your illness, or side things happen. And so it's good to have a plan B and a plan C.
Yeah. So neuroscience, I'm gonna get real nerdy for a second, folks. So sorry. So neuroscience tells us that when our emotions get really ratcheted up, this prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part, it's like, meh, I'm out. We're not using this part anymore. We're using the fight or flight, and we're using other stuff. And it gets hard to make decisions. So if you are an individual and you're trying to go through the medical aid and dying process, and a roadblock comes up, and you are really emotionally attached to this process for a lot of reasons, right? And I'm not saying that in a pejorative or a negative way, but you have a vision of how you want this process to go, and there is a roadblock, it can really shut down your ability to think through that roadblock. You are having an appropriate and strong reaction, and it is hard to think.
Mm.
And then a Lindsay is part of the conversation, or I am part of the conversation. And we can just ask the questions to give you the space to sort of re-regulate, take it one piece at a time, nice and slow, remember what the values were that brought you into this process, and decide what you want to do next. I was saying goodbye to someone recently who was taking this medication. We had a moment like one-on-one to ourselves. And she was saying thank you to me, which was really nice. I'm gonna get choked up. I'm sorry. Um, but I care about the people that I work with, so I'm not sorry. Real emotions. She was saying to me, thank you for helping her through the process, and that she always felt really well supported. And one of the things that she said, and it really meant a lot to me, which is why I'm getting choked up about it, is you always put me in the driver's seat. She said, you know, there were a lot of times that things changed and I needed to change dates and whatnot, or communicate different things to my family. And you always asked me what I wanted to do, what was important to me. You never told me what to do next. And she said, and that was really important to me. And I hadn't been, that is our goal with this work. I had not been aware of how my interactions with her were landing on her in those situations. And so when she said that to me, I was like, I'm so glad I did that. Like I got that right. I'm so glad that she felt that way. That means so much to me. And I'm so glad she told me.
Yes.
Absolutely. I want to invite Kathy in Texas. Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I've been enjoying the conversation though, because I've just transferred my mother into hospice within the last, I guess, month or so. And just kind of working with her and working with them. And I feel like I'm getting a lot of support from them, and they're letting me decide, and my mom,
Mm-hmm.
how many people we want coming by, and it's been a good experience so far.
Good, 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 good. Well, I'm glad you could be here today.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So little after 5. I did just put in the chat, just about, again, the upcoming podcast interview topics, and that, you all get the exclusive, invitations because of, the work that you've done and what you've chosen. And I'm grateful. I look forward, Kasey, to I took some notes as far as, different things that you offered to send. That will be helpful. And thank you for putting your link in there, your email address, and I will include that in the wrap up and stuff of what I send out. I You all never cease to amaze me, Kasey. I owe you like so big time for so many things of, meetings we've had. So it's been really great. And it's nice to have both you and Lindsay here who, have that kind of experience that can help. Last call for questions, thoughts? Okay.
And
Well, thank you.
I'm going to open an invitation, because I know that 5 minutes after we get out of a Zoom, you think of a question
Yes.
and you go, oh, I wish I had asked whatever it is. So I dropped my email in the chat. If you have a
Thank you.
follow-up question, it's a genuine invitation. Reach out, ask away. I am totally happy to answer. I love having these conversations. It is not a bother. Do not be shy.
Thank you, Kasey.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Trish.
Perfect. You're
Bye,
welcome, Nadine.
And thank you so much for the invitation, Tris. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Steve, Lindsay, Margot, Nadine, and Kathy. Mwah. See you next time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.